Hello again, it's Mr. Brown. I'm going to complete today chapter 15, Police Headquarters, for you. If you remember that Emil and his friends and the thief have been taken to the police station where they're trying to remember or work out exactly who the thief is because he's given different names and they're not entirely sure. Emil and his friends have been celebrated by the police there who think he and his friends are superb mini detectives. And we just finished that part of the chapter with some information about the fact that the press are there who want to interview Emil. And I'm going to carry on reading from that section there now. So, some gentlemen from the press want to interview you, said the superintendent. Goodness, what does that mean? They'll ask you lots of questions. Gosh, does that mean my name will be in the papers? I shouldn't wonder. When a schoolboy catches a thief, he becomes news. There was a knock at the door and 4 men came in and shook hands with the superintendent. He told them briefly what had happened to Emil, and they scribbled it down in their notebooks. What a story, said one of the reporters. Country boy turns detective. I suppose you'll be taking him on as a plainclothesman, one of the others suggested, laughing. Why didn't you go straight to the police and report your loss? Asked another. That reminded Emil about Sergeant Yeshka at home and of his dream, and he began to feel nervous again. Well? Asked the superintendent. Emil took the plunge. I chalked a red nose and a moustache on the statue of Grand Duke Charles in Neustadt, he confessed. So you'd better arrest me. To his surprise, the 5 men burst out laughing, and instead of looking grave as he had expected, they laughed. Bless me, exclaimed the big man. We can't go on arresting one of our best detectives. Oh, do you mean... Oh, that is a relief, Emil sighed heavily and turned to one of the reporters. You don't remember me, he said. No, I can't say I do. You paid my fare yesterday on a number 177 tram because I hadn't any money, Emil reminded him. Of course I did. I remember now, and you asked for my address so that you could pay me back the money. Yes, and now I can. Emil put his hand in his pocket and brought out some pennies. I'd like to give it to you, please, he said. No, that's all right, said the young man hastily. Didn't you tell me your name too? Yes, Emil Tischbein. And mine's Kestner, said the journalist, and they shook hands. So you're old acquaintances. Splendid, exclaimed the superintendent. How would you like to come along with me, Emil, and see my newspaper office? Said Mr. Kestner. We could stop at a cafe on the way and have some cream cakes. I'd like to treat you. I'd like to treat you, said Emil. This amused the journalist very much. You are independent, they said. No, this is on me, said Mr. Kestner. Thanks ever so much, Emil said with a big smile, but Gustav and the professor are waiting for me outside. Then they must come too, said Mr. Kestner. The other journalists asked a few more questions and noted down Emil's answers. Then one of them asked the superintendent if he thought the theft was Gruntheis's first offence. I doubt it, was the reply. Indeed, there may be a big surprise in store for all of us there, and if you ring me up in an hour's time, gentlemen, I may have some news for you. Then they all said goodbye, and Emil went back with Mr. Kestner to Sergeant Ludwig's room. He was still eating, but greeted Emil cheerfully. Oh, back again, young Uberbein, he said. Tischbein, said Emil. They picked up Gustav and the professor, and Mr. Kestner bundled the boys into his car and drove them to a cafe. On the way, Gustav honked his horn, and the others were delighted when it made Mr. Kestner jump. The cafe was first-rate. They had cherry slices with masses of whipped cream, and told Mr. Kestner all about their adventures, about the Council of War in St. Nicholas Square, and having to follow the thief in a taxi, and the night in the hotel when Gustav was disguised as a lift boy, and of the terrific row at the bank. Well, you really are grand chaps, said Mr. Kestner at the end of the story, and they felt so pleased with themselves that they had another round of cherry slices. Then they separated, and Gustav and Professor went home by bus, promising to ring up little Tuesday, and Emil drove with Mr. Kessner to his office. The building in which the newspaper was printed was a huge place, almost as big as the police headquarters, and far busier. People kept scuttling to and fro in the corridors as though they were running in an obstacle race. They went into a room where a pretty fair-haired girl was sitting at a desk. Mr. Kessner immediately began to dictate Emil's story to her, and she took it straight down on the typewriter. He walked about the room as he dictated, and every little while he asked, Emil, is that right?" And Emil nodded, and then the typing went on again. At the end of it, he rang up the superintendent, and Emil heard him say, "What's that?" "Well, isn't that amazing?" "No. All right, I won't say a word." "What? As well?" "Delighted to hear it, thanks very much. That's a story, all right." He hung up and looked at Emil, almost as if he had never seen him before. "We must have a picture of you, Emil. Come along, quick." "Gosh," exclaimed Emil, greatly surprised. "A picture? Me? Why?" But he went obediently with Mr. Kessner up 3 floors in the lift, and then into a very brightly lit room with several large windows. Emil tidied his hair, and then his photograph was taken. Finally, they went to the compositor's room, where there was a clatter like 1,000 typewriters at work all at once. Mr. Kessner gave a man there the pages which the fair-haired girl had typed. "This is a very important story," he said. "I'll be back in a minute to discuss it. I've just got to send this nipper back to his grandmother." Then they went down in the lift to the ground floor and out into the street. Mr. Kessner hailed a taxi and put Emil inside. "Take this young man to 15 Schumann Street as quick as you can," he said, and gave the driver his fare, which Emil didn't like. Then he took Emil and shook hands. Give your mother my regards when you get home again," he said. "She must be a pet." "Yes, she is," Emil replied. "Oh, and another thing," Mr. Kessner called as the taxi started off. "Be sure you get hold of this evening's newspaper and read what it says. You'll have the surprise of your life." Emil leaned out of the window to wave to him, and Mr. Kessner waved back until the taxi swung round a corner and was out of sight. We've got a picture here. It's an illustration here of the print room in the newspaper. You'll see there that's an illustration which has also been done by the author. And you will have noticed, perhaps, that in this particular chapter, he's been taken to the newspaper by a character called Mr. Kessner. It's the name of the interviewer, the main name of the reporter. But of course, you'll remember that Mr. Erich Kessner is the name that's at the top of this book. I'm not sure if you can read that backwards, but Erich Kessner is at the top of the book there as the author of the book. So the author has managed to bring himself into the story briefly towards the end. So again, I hope you're enjoying the story. We've got a little bit more to do, a little bit more to resolve before the end, and I'll be reading some more on there tomorrow. Okay, stay safe, have a lovely evening, and I'll speak to you tomorrow.